My name is Maddie, and welcome to another Telequarium with the Alaska Sea Life Center. So as you can see, I am not physically at the Sea Life Center right now. We are practicing physical distancing to make sure that everyone is staying safe during this time, but we still want to bring you some really great programming. So for those of you that have been around, we have been going live on YouTube every single day at 12 and 2 p.m., and we are so glad that you could join us this morning. So in a moment, I'm going to be teaching you about skulls, which are a really great biofact and incredibly educational and informational. So I will be talking about 3 different skulls from animals that you can find here in Alaska. I'm going to be talking about the different features that give us hints as to what these animals are doing, how they're eating, a lot of really great things. But I will be talking about the differences between carnivores, which are going to be animals that eat meat, omnivores, which are going to be animals that eat meat and plants, and then herbivores, which are going to be animals that just eat plants. So once again, we are so excited that you can join us, and please enjoy learning about skulls. All right, so I'm going to be taking us through some pictures of some skulls from animals that live here in Alaska. I'm going to be pointing out some really incredible features about them, and then at the very end of this, we will do a bit of a guessing game as to whose skulls I am showing you. So let's go ahead and get started. You are looking at 3 different skulls in front of you right now. I will give you a hint. These are skulls that belong to mammals, and all 3 of these mammals are types of animals that you could find in Alaska. So I'm going to take us through the different features bit by bit, but right now I want everyone to take a guess as to what we are looking at right now. And then at the end of it, I will go ahead and let you know if you are right or not. But my one hint is that these are mammals, and they live in Alaska, but I want you to guess who exactly we're looking at. Alright, so like I mentioned earlier, you can learn so much about an animal just by looking at their skulls, and one of the most defining or prominent parts about a skull is going to be those teeth. So, looking at these teeth, let's go ahead and figure out if we can get closer to what animals we are looking at. So an animal's teeth can give us some insight into their diet and what they're eating. And I'll start by teaching you about the 4 different types of teeth. So I will go over which ones I've pointed out in a moment, but to start, your front teeth are called your incisors, and those are used for cutting and grasping food. And then if you move a little bit farther back, you're going to have some canines, and those are what those red arrows are pointing at on these skulls right now. And those canines are primarily used for tearing food. You move a little bit farther back, you're going to get into some premolars, and those are used for crushing. And then if you move all the way back, you got some molars, and those are used for grinding. Now, not every animal is going to have all 4 kinds of these teeth, and so looking at what they do have is a great hint and insight into what kind of animal they are and how they spend their time eating their food, how they eat their food, what kind of food they're eating. So herbivores are going to have really, really large incisors, and they're also going to have premolars because they're going to be nipping and grinding vegetation. So they need really strong teeth to be able to pull those vegetation away, but then they're going to need those premolars and molars in the back to grind that up. So it doesn't necessarily look like we've got some big incisors going on in these teeth. I'm not sure that these teeth might be used for vegetation per se. But then carnivores are going to have kind of smaller incisors, but they're going to have really, really large canines. So I've placed some arrows, and you can see we've got some large canines going on, and they are very sharp. And they're going to have some sharp premolars and maybe even some molars as well. So carnivores are spending their time eating meat, and so they need resources in order to properly tear that meat, to grind, or not necessarily grind, but to shear that meat away. And so it looks like the teeth that we have are going to be used for eating meat. So I think it looks like these might be some carnivores that we are dealing with. However, omnivores, they might have all of those teeth because they're going to be eating some meat, they're going to be eating some vegetation, they're going to need those adaptations to be able to eat a wide variety of food. If you want an example of what some omnivores' teeth might look like, go ahead and take a look in the mirror. We humans are omnivores, and so we have incisors, we have canines, we have premolars, and we have molars. So we have those teeth that are designed for all sorts of different things. But our teeth are going to look a lot different than the teeth we got going right now because we eat a lot of different things than we do. So I think, step one, I think we have some meat-eating creatures in front of us. So let's move on to these guys' eyeballs. Believe it or not, you can actually tell the difference between an herbivore and a carnivore based off of where their eyeballs are located. So I'll show you a little trick at the end of this video, but to start, carnivores are going to have really, really big eyes facing forward, and they have what's called binocular vision. And so that means that they can see objects with both eyes at the same time, which gives them really good depth perception. So when they're going to be chasing their prey, they're going to want to be able to really zone in on them and figure out where they are and where they're going. And then herbivores are going to have eyeballs placed on the sides of their heads, and they have what's called monocular vision, which means that an object is seen with only one eye at a time. And what they lack in depth perception, they make up for because they can see in all directions. And so they can really scope out if there are any predators in the area. And omnivores generally have eyes mainly facing towards the front. So I have circled the orbits on these skulls in front of us, and it looks like these guys have some large eyes and they are facing forward. So I believe that these have binocular vision, and so that really lines up with the teeth that we're looking at. It looks like these skulls are built to find prey and to eat some meat. So there's another hint as to what we are looking at. Moving on to the next clue is going to be that nose. So this hole at the front where their nose would be located is called the rostrum, and it houses these animals' sense of smell. And so a large rostrum might indicate that this animal uses its sense of smell for hunting, or maybe it uses its nose to kind of probe the ground. However, if you're looking at a skull and it seems like they have a smaller nose or maybe a shorter nose, that could indicate that the animal relies on some other senses for hunting. So we've definitely got some noticeable rostrums on these skulls. We'll go over at the end how these animals' senses of smell are, but it's a really great resource. Just by looking at the skull of an animal, you can tell what they use and what they rely on for hunting, and it's great insight into these individual adaptations. I have saved my favorite part of the skull for last, and that is going to be the jaw. The jaw houses a lot of information about these animals. Once again, it lets us know how they eat, what kind of food they're eating, and it also indicates a lot of strength about the animal, which I'll explain in a moment. But when it comes to the jawbone, the carnivore's jawbone is going to be attached so that they only open and close. They're only moving up and down, and they're not really able to move side to side. Now, in contrast, herbivores' jaws are going to be much more fastened loosely, and they can move side to side, which allows them to grind material with their molars. And then omnivores are going to be more like carnivores. They're typically eating fruit and seeds rather than grass and branches. But looking at these guys, I've put some arrows to kind of show you. It looks like these jaws are only opening up and down. You can see how those teeth lock into place and doesn't really allow for a lot of wiggle room for them to move side to side. And so I think that it's a good bet that these are some carnivores with how their jaws are fastened, and it seems like they're only going up and down. And another really cool indicator that I have placed a circle around that you can kind of see on this photo is the sagittal crest. And the sagittal crest is this ridge that is at the top and kind of goes on to the back of the skull. And it indicates what they're eating because the larger that ridge, it means the stronger their bite is. And so this isn't a great photo, but if you're looking at skulls anytime in the future, I highly recommend looking for that sagittal crest because some of these larger predators are going to have really intense sagittal crests, which would indicate that they have a very, very strong bite. So it looks like we've got some up and down moving jaws. We've got some prominent sagittal crests. I really think we've got some carnivores in front of us. So I hope that gives you another clue as to who we might be looking at. So we have talked about what their eyeballs, what their noses, what their teeth, what their jaws, what all of this information might tell us, and we walked through these individual pieces. So now let's figure out what three skulls we were actually looking at. So this first skull belongs to a sea lion. For those of you that got that right, we have stellar sea lions here at the Alaska Sea Life Center, and we also have sea lions that live in Alaska. So these guys are mammals, like I mentioned earlier, and they are carnivores. So you can see that they've got those sharp teeth that lock into one another that are great at helping them catch that meat, so primarily fish, and then kind of tear that up easily. And they are well suited for that, as you can see by those adaptations. As far as their eyesight, it's fairly acute, so they have some fairly good discrimination of bold outlines and rapid movements that's going to help them find that food for them. And then looking at that rostrum, you might think that that sense of smell might help them smell fish in the water. What's actually better used for that is going to be those whiskers that you can kind of see on this picture of the sea lion. Their whiskers help sense vibrations in the water that then indicate if something is kind of swimming by, but their sense of smell does help them in pup recognition for those females when they're looking for their babies. Alrighty, so this next skull belongs to a polar bear. So we do not have polar bears at the Alaska Sea Life Center. They don't live in Seward, Alaska. However, they do live way, way up north in Alaska, which is pretty exciting. But these guys are mammals, and they are definitely carnivores. So you can see they've got those massive, massive canines at the front of their mouth, well suited for eating meat. They primarily eat seals, and so they can grab onto that prey, they can tear it up. They're going to have no problem with tools like that. And then as far as that big rostrum you can see at the front, they do have a fairly acute sense of smell. It's a really important sense for detecting prey on land. And it is said that a polar bear can most likely smell a seal from more than 1 kilometer away and 1 meter underneath the snow, which is really impressive. But this belongs to a polar bear. This last skull belongs to a harbor seal, so a slightly smaller mammal, but still a carnivore. So you can see they've got lots of pretty sharp canines and just sharp premolars going on as well. So they are also going to be carnivores. They're eating fish, and so they are well suited for that. They have really large eyes that are adapted for sight in dark and murkier waters. And similar to the sea lion, their sense of smell is used for mothers identifying their pups. So you can see that rostrum going on. But these are definitely carnivores, which is what we got from those teeth. So kudos to those of you that got this one right. Congratulations for those of you that got all 3 of those right. Let us know in the comments below how you did on this. But I did mention when I was talking about eyeballs that I had a nifty little trick for how to distinguish between herbivores and carnivores and looking at eyes on a skull. So I will show you now. Like I mentioned, if animals are carnivores, they're going to primarily have eyeballs on the front of their head looking forward. So you can make some binoculars with your hands. You put them like this, and you're going to say eyes on the front, ready to hunt, because they're zoning in on that prey with that binocular vision. However, with herbivores, if you kind of twist your arms like this and stick them on the side of your head so you can only see in your peripheral, you're going to say eyes on the side, ready to hide. So this is a really great representation when looking at skulls, trying to figure out what kind of food they're eating, or if they might be the ones that are being eaten. But I really want to thank you guys for tuning in with us today. We have been going live on YouTube every single day at 12 and 2 p.m. and we are really glad that you could join us, and we hope you have a lovely rest of your day.